Welcome everybody. Do have to advise you as usual that the meeting is being live streamed and webcast on the council's YouTube site. If you haven't already been on there, do go and have a look. And that members of the press and public can take photos or recordings, except where there are confidential items, which we haven't got any as far as I know today. We have received a number of apologies. Councillor Julie Birmingham and Councillor Simon Morale. Yeah. Oh, and also from Rabia Sharmi. Have we got any other apologies? No, thank you very much. Item 3 are declarations of interests. Members are reminded that they must declare all relevant pecuniary and other registrable interests arising from any business to be discussed at this meeting. Are there any interests to declare? Thank you very much. Item 4 are the action notes, which are the minutes from the previous meeting. And we need to agree those notes of the meeting held on the 22nd of February. They were circulated to myself and Councillor Hughes, so we did have a chance to have a look through them. I hope everybody else has had a chance to look through them. Any comments? Happy to note those. Thank you very much. Item 5 is the action tracker. We have had a structure chart sent through, and we've also had some other information. The structure chart sets out the senior management structure and areas of work that they're responsible for. Has the committee had a chance to have a look at that, and is there anything they feel is missing off that? Councillor Hughes is looking puzzled.
I have to admit, I haven't looked at it, but the question was in response to the Cabinet Member's report, when she said there were 20 departments in the directorate, and I just asked what they were. So I'm not sure if the response answers that question.
Okay, so let's have, if you have a look at that structure chart, and then if we do feel that some things are missing off there that doesn't answer those questions, that we can ask for more information.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. We've also had the information that was requested relating to exclusions and part-time tables. I think that was you requesting that information as well, Councillor Hughes. Have you had a chance to have a look through that yet?
As I said in the last meeting, Chair, the question was largely answered in response to a written question to a meeting of the full council.
Okay.
And I think the actual figures are noted in the minutes, Chair. So
that's lovely. Everybody happy with those then? Thank you very much. So we're going to move swiftly on to our first main item, which is an update from the Children's Trust. I'd like to welcome Andrew Christie, who's the chair of the Children's Trust, Andy Coldrick, who is the chief executive of the Trust, and we've also got Councillor Karen McCarthy, the Cabinet Member for Children, Young People and Families, and Sue Harrison, the Strategic Director for Children and Families in attendance. So welcome, Andrew and Andy. I don't know who wants to kick us off here.
Thank you very much, Chair. I won't go through the report in detail. I'm very aware that there are some particular issues that members may want to talk to us about in relation to the review of short break, and indeed I'm sure Sophia similarly. Very happy to do that and to take any questions on any other matters. If I gallop through the headlines in my report, we're busy, demand is rising, the cost of living and other things make a difference to that. We see that in terms of greater numbers than ever in our early help service, higher numbers than ever being coming through as contacts and referrals to our front door, the assessment and support service and the multi-agency safeguarding hub. And we're seeing it in terms of upward pressure in terms of numbers of children in care. A subset that's driving that number up is we're seeing significant increases over the last 6 months in the number of unaccompanied asylum-seeking young people who are arriving through a variety of three main routes into care. We're seeing some are spontaneous arrivals, those who find their way into the city and then declare themselves. Those coming through the National Transfer Scheme, so where they're allocated, as they arrive, they're allocated to authorities on a rotating basis. And the third group we're seeing are young people who are arriving in Birmingham in adult asylum seeker hotels and then being identified as young people, and therefore we'll take them out of the hotel and find them provide them with the appropriate care or support and accommodation. But that's a significant pressure, and they become children in care. They grow and become care leavers, and we continue to support them up to the age of 25, and that's entirely right and proper, but creates a pressure in the system and a pressure on the budget. I've set out the variety of inspection gradings that we've had. I can't share the specifics of the March ILACS inspection. That's the inspection of all of our services from the front door through to adoption and leaving care. It's published on the 18th of April, but I can give some clues later if you want to ask me any questions about it. But it does reflect the progress that we believe we've made since we were established in 2018. The council has treated us well in terms of the financial pressures that we're experiencing, and we will continue to work as collaboratively as we can with the council, because I don't think the pressure is going to evaporate overnight. The national picture is of upward pressure and demand for children's social care services. I think I've said before in this committee that the independent review that government commissioned identified the need for investment of around £2.5 billion in children's social care. To date, the government response has been an initial investment of 200 million. So all children's service authorities are going to go on experiencing pressure in terms of demand. Some of the areas of risk of concern that I'd want to highlight, one Ofsted you'll see will highlight when they publish, and that's around the wider partnership response to domestic abuse in the city. It's a significant driver of demand for our services, and there are some big gaps in provision. For example, there are no perpetrator programs in the city, and that's a significant gap, and it places quite a lot of pressure on social workers, because it leads to them managing risk for children in situations where there aren't services to work with perpetrators. It's an issue we're raising and escalating. It'll become an issue that's not only for the Children's Trust, but it's for the Community Safety Partnership and the wider Children's Partnership. Children's and parental mental ill health is a significant issue, and we're looking to work very hard with our colleagues in the integrated care system to shape and develop children's mental health services that work in as integrated a way as we can manage with community services. So we can use in different ways. There'll always be pressure on the system around contextual and exploitation. There's been quite a lot in the news just this week around this. It continues to be a significant issue. Ofsted identified our contextual safeguarding responses as a strength, but the wider system is under pressure. We know that there are concerns about exploitation. Some highlighted in the recovery this week around peace responses and findings of the child protection reviews. And the government response to this has been to refer to the notion of mandatory reporting. I think we need to see the detail of what's proposed before we have a sense of whether that's going to be what makes the difference. What we need is for the system to be able to identify and respond collaboratively as soon as there are some concerns being identified. We've got some good examples of where that's working better, such as trust staff embedded in the City of Birmingham school who can work with the school to identify young people at risk early and put together a different type of response. And we're working hard with the council around its programme around early intervention and prevention, because obviously we see that as a significant extra tier in our ability to support families early in order that they don't end up needing social care involvement. I've referred to the impact of the cost of living, some of the work that we've done using the holiday activities with food money to run programmes with partners and with the council to try and reach young people and families who might miss out. I've referenced our strategic priorities that obviously include responding to the 2 inspections we've had recently, the Ofsted inspection, which will come to Cabinet in due course. As I said, it's not published until the 18th. The inspection of the HMIP into the Youth Offending Service that I think is coming to Cabinet later this month, that identifies that significant improvements were evident compared with the previous inspection, but there's still quite a long way to travel, and we would absolutely recognise that. We want to continue to drive our partnership working and support Sue in her leadership of the children's system through the Children's Partnership. Continue to build our relationship, which Ofsted again identified as an emerging strength in this inspection with the council, and in terms of us being both strategic partners and demonstrating that we're an efficient value for money partner for the council. The council recently, through Cabinet, approved a new contract with the trust that reflects, I think, the view that we are providing that improving quality of service for children and families, and we'll continue to work with the council to build the strength in that relationship and to demonstrate that we're being both as effective and efficient as we can be. We know we've got to continue to focus on equality, diversity and inclusion issues in the trust, both as an employer of a very diverse workforce and as a service provider to a very diverse community. And again, Ofsted has something to say about that in the report. Recruitment and retention is a national challenge as well as a regional challenge. And it's interesting that it always used to be that it was qualified social workers that we struggled to recruit. Now we're struggling to recruit unqualified personal advisors for our care leavers, family support workers. The employment landscape has changed significantly since COVID. And frankly, supermarket pay rates are now better than competitive with the rates of pay we offer. So that's a challenge, and that will apply to all of the workforce in the council and care services, I've no doubt. I know it does for other services. Had that conversation with Graham. And then, as a way of segueing into the questions you may have for me about the reviews of short breaks, which has caused some concern, I know. As well as that, we with the council know that we need to work with partners, parents, carers around the bigger short breaks offer. So there's that element that is available for all parents, and then there's the element that includes, for example, Charles House, Warwick House, the residential short breaks units run by the trust. So the offer for families who are who have an open case with the trust. So 2 elements, if you like, a universal offer and a targeted offer for families working who have a child whose case is open to the Children's Trust. And that work's beginning, and we need to undertake that in order to make sure really that the offer is as impactful as it can possibly be at the very beginning of that work. Very happy to stop there.
Sorry, Andy, I was just writing that down.
I can carry on, as you know, I can carry on if you'd like me to.
No, that's fine, because it will always give you a chance to come back clearly. I know that Andrew wants to come in.
Yeah, Joe, if I could just add a couple of comments to those Andy. I mean, just to start with the issue of the kind of rising demand pressure. One thing I should just add to what Andy said, because absolutely he's correct in my judgment in saying that this is a kind of product of the life experiences of children and families in the city during COVID. In part, a kind of product of the kind of rising pressure kind of cost of living. But I think the other thing is worth taking stock, just looking back over a longer period of time than that. When I first came as commissioner and replaced Lord Warner, I remember that one of the issues that Lord Warner highlighted at the time was how low referral rates were to children's social care services in the city, and his hypothesis, and what I agreed with, was that this is perhaps a kind of product of kind of lack of kind of engagement, or lack of kind of knowledge, lack of confidence in the system, and so that there were children out there who were not getting the services that they should have been getting. And actually what we've seen since, and over those 7 or 8 years that I've been working with you, has been a kind of also a kind of change in terms of that kind of awareness of need of the kind of, and so therefore kind of increased rate of referrals, and a strengthening of the partnership arrangements as well. That's going to be that's laid behind that. So I think at one level, oddly, it's a success story. So we should not forget that aspect of that kind of rising demand. And the second thing I did also want to say is that, to reiterate Andy's point about how important it's been for us. So when you see the Ofsted report, I think you'll be hopefully have a kind of sense of satisfaction and kind of pride in that. It's really important, and I think the report makes this point, that behind that has been a kind of really rock solid partnership between the trust and the council, and that shouldn't also be underestimated, because sadly that doesn't always happen in kind of other parts of the country where there have been these arrangements put in place. So I just wanted to pay tribute to that. The council has been there to provide us with the kind of additional funding that we needed at the time, and as Andy said, has culminated in the kind of agreement to kind of enter into a new contract with the trust. So I'd just like to kind of pay recognition to that at the time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I know that Councillor Hughes has got a question. I've got some questions there. Thank you. Anybody else?
Everybody's eager now. Lovely. Councillor Hughes, do you want to go first?
So be it, Chair. Thank you. I suppose a few points I'd like to make. First of all, I do welcome the award of the contract for 10 years. Well, I think it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? On the one hand, it clearly provides you with some certainty, and it's a recognition of how far you've come from 2018. We can't forget that the reason the Children's Trust exists is because we had so many years of inadequate findings on our services. But what does worry me, you've referred to the increasing demand. Now, like many councillors, I've been a school governor at schools. I've worked in the sector to some degree. Those demands are increasing all the time. Could you give us some explanation of how your contract copes with that? Because obviously you can have a contract to, for argument's sake, provide social care for 5 kids, but you've got a contract that says you've pretty much got to deal with whatever's thrown at you for the next 10 years. And we know what that trajectory is. The demands are going up. The complexity of the cases is going up. And the funding is getting harder to get hold of. So if you could provide just a little bit of information about how you expect to cope with that. Also, obviously, the recruitment process is a problem. What I kind of don't understand is we're in a situation where we can't pay social workers enough. So we have to recruit social workers from agencies who are paid more, the simple question to me is, why don't we just pay them more? We are going to have to at some point. I'm sure it's more complicated than I think it is. And just finally, I am awaiting the Ofsted report with eager anticipation. I hope that you feel it's a fair reflection of the work that you've done, and I hope it gives us some guidance, not just about what's been accomplished, but about what needs to be addressed in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Kathy.
I think it wasn't the social work recruitment that was difficult. I think it was the support work.
It's all of it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's all
I'm
of
very
it.
happy to address it because, and hopefully it's one of the areas where government has an intention to address it in a way that's going to happen.
Yeah, but the prime question is that resources increasing demand. I just don't see how it comes together in a nicely in a contract.
I don't think it comes together any easier than it would were we a department of the council. Because if demand's going up, the onus on us as a trust, in exactly the same way as if we're a department, is to demonstrate that we're meeting the demand that we should in a way that's the most efficient and effective that we can in the context of the market in which we're operating. And that market is the two problems with the market in which we operate are exactly the one around staff, and the other is around the placements market for children in care, which is broken too. So in the review of the contract, one of the things that's been introduced is that as part of our routine reviewing of our performance, so every month Sue chairs a meeting that holds us to account for our performance and our financial performance, and we use that to highlight where issues are. What we've never had in our contract until now that other trusts had was the facility in the contract that reflects that if demand in terms of children in care numbers is rising, that will demonstrate that, illustrate that we're doing all we can to avoid care whilst not avoiding care for those who absolutely need it. Then there has to be a contract adjustment to reflect that growing pressure. Now, the context of that is that our rate of children in care in Birmingham, and it may link to the point that Andrew made earlier, our rate is there are, I think we're at about 74 children per 10,000 as a rate of children in care. Now, if we compare that, our statistical neighbour rate is 82 per 10,000. And the Cross City's rate is around 85 or 86 per 10,000. So we think that supports that a lot of the services that we've built that are around supporting children stay in their families are having some success. So while we're seeing the number rise, we're seeing the number rise, but the rate isn't catching up with what it looks like in other authorities around us and other authorities against which we would compare ourselves. So the contract does have the capacity to adjust to reflect that, but we need to be absolutely transparent about the fact that we're striving and continuing to strive to deliver value for money. And one of the things that happened, I think, 18 months ago was that CIPFA were commissioned by the council to conduct a value for money review of the trust, and it said they are providing value for money, and they probably don't have enough money to deal with the growing pressure around children in care. So that's how the contract flexes, but there's an onus on both partners in the contract to demonstrate that we're doing the best we can. And you know, Sue, I'm quite sure would agree that as her services in that universal space strengthen, that helps us too. Moving on to the two bits that cause a problem, there aren't enough care placements. There aren't enough secure placements for children with very significant needs. And there's been a reduction in mental health beds for children who are acutely mentally distressed and unwell. And look, one of the consequences of that is we've seen significant rises in the number of care packages we put together that cost significant amounts per child. Government's recognised that in the care review that it carried out, and is beginning now to respond to that in terms of needing to improve the care market. One of the things we're desperate to do is to recruit more foster carers, and we've got work to do to demonstrate why fostering is a great choice. And if you've got a spare room in your house and time on your hands, then don't go and get a job at Tesco's, be a foster carer. It's a big commitment, but you get good support from the trust, and our carers attest to that, and some of that pulled through again into the Ofsted report. We want to explore how we can grow more of our own residential provision. So when the trust when the trust was born, the council had outsourced, I think, 6 children's homes to the Priory. It wasn't a great contract, and it didn't help us to find placements for children that needed placement. So we ended that contract and can commission most of the placements that we need. So with 99% of children who need a care placement, we find an appropriate placement. But for a small number, we have to create bespoke arrangements that are both challenging, sometimes sit outside the regulated framework, and therefore cause Ofsted to become interested in what we're doing and why we're doing it, and cost significant. So the government's proposition is to change some of the marketisation and regulation of what is largely a private sector care market now, and to begin to explore regional commissioning of placement so that authorities are bound to work together to meet need. On agency social workers, one of the problems is that actually social workers leave training now and go and work for an agency because they think it gives them the opportunity to try different authorities. So the nature of the kind of context has changed. And agencies do pay a higher rate, despite our efforts as a region to keep a cap on rates. They pay more. Why can't we, the trust, pay social workers more? Essentially because we're, in legal terms, we're and I think we're called an associated employer of the council. Therefore, we can't do anything the council doesn't do, and vice versa.
That's interesting, Andy, because I remember from discussions,
previous years about incentivising
social work roles so that you could attract more social workers into the trust. So that's interesting. Is that relatively? When did you find that out? Basically,
we've always known that, and we've done as much as we're legally able to do in terms of non-contract incentives to bring people in and to keep them. And we're running a really successful academy program that enables us to bring in, we hope in the coming year, the highest number of new social workers of any system in the country. So they're called ASYEs, and they're assessed and supported year. It's the social worker, the newly qualified teacher. They reduce caseload, they get lots of development time, lots of support, and they tell us, and told Ofsted, that it was successful and that the trust was a place they wanted to stay. They told Ofsted that their caseloads were manageable. All of our social workers that Ofsted spoke to, and that was probably close to 100. We don't cherry pick. Ofsted independently decide who they want to speak to and which cases they want to audit as part of their inspection. We don't get to choose or cherry pick.
Andrew's indicating. So
yeah, I was going to come in and add. And of course, it was the case as well that the council did make a change in terms of pay conditions of the social workers in adult social care, which we were able to kind of then replicate, which has made a contribution. I think there's always a risk in terms of just upping pay rates for your own social workers, that actually all you do is stoke a kind of inflationary spiral because that's what often happens with failing local authorities is they kind of suddenly start paying huge rates of pay, and they kind of that kind of stokes what's happening in the whole region. I think if the government does make some of the changes that they've stated they're going to make in terms of some of the limits to, for example, you won't be able to go and work in an agency immediately post-qualifying. So if they make some of those changes, I think that will help. There's no one silver bullet that's going to kind of solve all of these problems. I'm going to come and answer the last bit of your question, which was, did you think that did we judge that Ofsted? So precisely what it is was a fair one. Yes, we do. We think that one of the things they said was, which is really important with inspection, is it's the case that we know ourselves because they do our own self-assessment as part of that judgment about how well the view is performing. Andy memorably described it as a very good force-free consultancy. I think it's not always something that's a kind of positive way of looking at it. They did come up with some kind of areas where we need to make improvements. You'll see those as 4-5 recommendations, I think, laid out. And be absolutely upfront, a couple of those, I think we weren't probably as well sighted on as we should have been. But and they're not huge on the scale of things, but they are significant. And of course, the reality of any children's social care services is always wrong. We've always got to go further because bad things can happen, and you've actually got to keep your kind of ahead of the game. So I'm sure that the committee will want to have a look at that report and understand some, just the kind of detail of those recommendations. And they will be built into the next stage of our improvement.
Sorry, if I may, on the last thing I'll say, on the recruitment and retention point, what Ofsted fed back to us was that they didn't speak to a single social worker who wasn't positive about working in the Children's Trust. And I think that's important because culturally 5 years ago, it didn't feel like that. And people, one of the values of an Ofsted report is that people in other places will read it and use it to judge whether Birmingham sounds like an interesting place to go and learn social work. And for a long time, it's put people off because it was Birmingham. I remember talking to a group of social workers during the inspection, and they said, the thing you have to realise, Andy, is that we're Birmingham, so we'll never be good. Which is a hard thing to hear, and it's why the inspection process and the report when it's published is as important for us internally and as a tool for recruitment as it is an external view, an independent view about for all of you and for the people of Birmingham about how these services are being run.
Thanks, Andy. And as Councillor Hughes said, we look forward to seeing the report, and I'm sure it'll come up in some more questions. I'm just going to ask you a few questions around the short breaks provision. Sarah's waiting to come in, so come in after me, Sarah. And then we've still got a couple of other questions waiting to come in. Just on the short breaks, Andy, can you just try help us understand because not everybody will have an understanding of why the services for disabled children sit in the trust. So an understanding around that. Why the decision to review the current provision has been taken. And, is that about assessing individual need, or is it about having to make savings because of the pressures that the trust are under? And we've seen in the press just recently that the reviews are being viewed in a negative terms by some parents for a number of reasons, but particularly through the use of IROs to undertake those reviews rather than family support workers who are a bit more family centred and know the families already. And then finally, how does you touched on it earlier with the universal offer and the targeted offer. So how does the short breaks provision fit in with other packages of support, both from the trust and across the council? So there's quite a few there, but
okay. So why are those services in the trust? So I think in 2016, the Disabled Children's Service in Birmingham was part of the Education Service. And when it was looked at in the inspection in 2016, Ofsted made a strong recommendation that it needed to be improved and that it should be sitting alongside the other social care services in the city. So prior to all of them moving into a trust, those social care services came together. And I think primarily the reason for that is that all of our social care services are governed by the same legislation, like primarily the Children Act 1989. So for the children we're working with, they're children who are subject, they're deemed to be children in need under Section 17 of that Act. And the guidance we have from government is very explicit about the need to review the packages of care that we are providing, because children's needs change over time and those packages may need to change to reflect that. So that's why they're in the trust. Why are we doing the reviews? Because I'll try and answer the other question. We ran the services. Trust is a big beast with many, many different services, all of which have needed some level of intervention and improvement since we came into existence in 2018. Some of that improvement was, of course, interrupted by the fact that we lived through, 2 years of pandemic and post-pandemic recovery. So we ran a programme of work to look at our disabled children's services in 2021. It was called Children First, and it was in that programme that we identified that we should make these reviews slightly more robust. We completely understand that the old model where family support workers involved with the families undertook it, but we felt that the fact that the model needed to have a stronger sense of independence. These are not independent reviewing officers as for children in care. These are reviewing officers who are independent of the line management of the case and therefore are not fettered by a will to see packages reduced, even if such a will existed. They're independent of the family support workers, and they're asked to talk to the relevant family members, stakeholders, those with parental responsibility, and form a view about what the right package should be. There's no savings requirement attached to it. There are no savings that are being made, and there are no savings that are being sought. And in terms of the overall picture, since we introduced this model, we've seen a package change. We've seen 2 packages increase, 31 stay the same, 16 reduce. Of those, some of those reduced because they were children using fewer than their allocated number of bed nights in Charles House and Warwick House. So one of the reasons we're changing this is because what existed previously was a model where if you were eligible, then you got the same offer. Fixed number of nights, for example, in Charles House or Warwick House. And what the reviews are identifying is actually a number of those nights aren't being taken up. And for some parents, the numbers they used less during the period of the pandemic and have continued to use less. Some of the packages have reduced in the sense that whilst they get the same, in fact, children get the same number of hours of care because their needs have changed. They don't need 2-to-1 care, they need 1-to-1 care. So that's not a reduction in the amount, it's a change to reflect that the child has grown, developed, is able to be a bit more independent and their behaviour more easy to manage. 6 packages have ended. 2 of those are as a consequence of children sadly dying who had very complex health needs. 2 because they've become adults and part of adult services. And in this period, 29 new packages have started. So it doesn't tally with the notion that we were doing this to save money, because there are more packages in total now than at the beginning. And that we know that demand is there. And we and the council cannot collectively continually increase the size of the cake. What we do therefore have to do is to make sure the cake's being divided as equitably as it can be, and according to need, and that's the object of the review. I think we regret that it's garnered the concern that it has. There are things that we've acknowledged that we should have done better sooner, in terms of there was, for example, a delay between that Children First project agreeing that we should change the model and the new model starting. And what we didn't do is go back to the Parent Carer Forum and ask them to help us to prepare the ground to implement the new model. And we've acknowledged that, and I've apologised previously for that. But we do want to continue to run a process that's compliant with our statutory responsibilities and less anxiety provoking. And I was struck by the level of anxiety that, for example, the BBC coverage reported. But the headline was that people fear something would happen that hasn't happened. And we need to work. I hope we can find a way of working together to make that better. And one of the things we want to do, the Trust wants to do, is to bring in some external support to help us to bring it, if you like, an independent pair of eyes through the Council for Disabled Children to what we're doing, to see how they can work with our family, parents and carers and the wider stakeholder group to make the process better, so that we are inducing less fear and anxiety, because that's not the intention. If I covered all of your questions.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. And I think that's important, that last point that you made around trying to recognising that the process has caused concern and looking at that and trying to improve and make that process easier and easier to navigate for parents. So I think that's a really important point. Andrew, I'll bring you in. Any other questions around short breaks in particular? Because I'm also going to ask Sabir if she's got anything to add to that, but I'll bring Andrew in first.
I just wanted to add a couple of points to what Andrew's already said, just to start with that last point. So I think the Council for Disabled Children is a very respected organisation. And so, their brief will be to come in and take an overview of the kind of the whole set of arrangements. And they'll produce a kind of analysis and a report, which again, we want to be completely open about, what they do conclude and what they come up with. So that's one point. And the second point is that I just wanted to add to one of the other kind of aims from changing the kind of the people who are doing the review of the short breaks provision. From the people who are actually directly responsible for administering it to people who have a slightly more independent position, is actually also to introduce greater equity. Because I think if you have some people who kind of, as it were, just one step back from the kind of actual delivery of these services, they can have a better view across the whole to make sure that what's happening is that everybody is getting a kind of equal provision. So that's two points.
Thank you, Andrew.
For anybody watching at home, we've got the chair of the Parent Carer Forum has joined us, Sabir Aziz. Sabir, have you just got anything to add around the, quite briefly though, because I am conscious of time, around the short breaks?
Well, I'll pick up on the points that have been made here. First of all, it's a shame that it had to get as far as it did, because I flagged it from August last year when it was a challenge, and I've emailed yourself, Andrew, Sue, the Commissioner, and nobody came back to me about anything. I had to literally beg to get a meeting that we had in December. I've had to take it all the way to Send Improvement Board. I've had a huge battle with this, so I'm really, really unhappy that it's ended up where it has, because it shouldn't have. I flagged it a lot earlier. Just touching on some of those points. The points about the IRO, why use the same terminology? It's so confusing to sit there and say these aren't the same independent reviewing officers that we use for looked after children. Why use the same acronym then? That just confuses the process and it confuses families. Again, why was the decision made without the service user involvement. I sat on the Children's First project for a whole year, every Monday morning. During the time that I lost my father to COVID, I still sat on that project. How disrespectful to then finish that project and not even bother telling me what the outcome of that project was. The project wrapped up in October 2021. The system started to be rolled out the following year, July 2022. In that time, we had monthly meetings at the Parent Carer Forum that BCT attended and sat there and said, there's no update, there's no update. The DCS also attended those meetings. We consistently requested, is there an update from Disabled Children's Social Care? There's no update. Then all of a sudden this process is rolled out. So they were given the opportunity to provide those updates and they didn't take it. The numbers don't match with regards to the packages that have been reduced. We know from the parents that we currently have in the forum, and I'm talking about 20 families of the 40 that have been reviewed, that there's more than 6 packages that have ended. Actually, one of those young people is my daughter. She's not dead and she's not an adult. So, and her package has been removed. And CDC, how interesting. I recently shared a report which actually describes the current position of SEND families really well, failed and forgotten. And there's no doubt that BCT and Disabled Children's Social Care are playing a part in that. So I'm pleased to hear that they're going to be involved in this. And again, finally, coming back to the numbers, there's 60,000 SEND families in Birmingham, 12,000 EHCPs. Why are such a small number open to Disabled Children's Social Care when we're talking about equity? I know from my experience from talking to the families that come to the forum that you make it really difficult for families to access short breaks and respite. Once they've got a care package, you make it really difficult for them to keep it. I have families saying to me, we look at you and the battle you've got and actually we don't want to be a part of it. And it was heartbreaking. Those parents that were on that press coverage are all parents that are in the group that we're representing. You're breaking these parents. You're breaking them, and it's only a matter of time before somebody ends up hurting themselves or their young person. Stop looking at disabled families as a safeguarding risk. Stop applying safeguarding protocols. When we come to you, we're asking for support. Stop scrutinising us and stop treating us like we're a risk and we're a safeguarding risk, because we're not.
Thank you, Sabia. I don't expect you to come back on everything that Sabia's raised there, because there's an awful lot, and I know that you'll have some. You have had, and I'm sure you will have some more conversations around some of these issues. In terms of the discrepancy with the numbers, Andy, could you go away and have a look at that and come back to the committee in terms of via email? Just having a look at those numbers and seeing whether or not there are those.
Yeah, more than happy to do that.
And is there anything at all that you want to pick up on in response to Sabia now?
Well, I'd just say in relation to that particular issue, make it crystal clear that for those people who are unhappy with the process, there is a complaint process. And so I just encourage those parents, if there are parents out there who, in the sense we're not, then they have that opportunity to raise issues throughout this process.
Thanks, Andrew. And yes, totally. I mean, complaints process, but we also need to make sure that parents know how to access the process. The process is, again, equitable for all parents. And I'm hoping that the review that you talked about of the process will flag up and address some of the concerns that have been raised. And, you know, we'll be very happy to have sight of that review here at the committee if you bring that back. Sarah, I'm going to bring you in because you've been very patient.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge the progress that's been made by the Trust. So I've been on this committee since the Trust was first formed. I've heard the whole thing for every year. And I'm
sorry.
No, I think we all have. I think it's important. And I just note that you're not on you're not at the next weekly meeting. Obviously, we haven't got the report, so we can't formally say anything that we might want to say, but we're not going to be able to say that at the next meeting in your presence. And I just want to acknowledge the progress that's been made over the period of the Trust, but particularly the transparent way it's been reported to this group. I have heard all of those sessions and acknowledging that not everything's right, clearly, but just want to note that. Thank you. But what I want to ask today is around the risk or areas of concern and the finances to be able to address those. So when I just read them as the ones not directly involved with the Trust, they have huge price tags next to them. And I'm just interested into how bearing in mind the contract's been signed and the limited money, etc., etc., what your overall strategy is to, for example, to look at perpetrator programs for domestic abuse, to tackle the things that they're within the financial envelope you've got.
Well, thank you for your kind words. It has been a long journey, and I have to say, engaging with scrutiny has been a positive part of that journey. It's felt really, one of the things that we know was an issue at the beginning of the trust establishment was a suspicion about our independence, were we some sort of outsourced institution, staying connected politically, both through the work I've done consistently with cabinet members and through this committee, has been a really important part of the kind of support and challenge that helps us to get better. On your specific point, I think that what Ofsted are pointing to is a broader partnership challenge, particularly around domestic abuse. So we're at the moment escalating a concern about the way Home Office grant money has been allocated around perpetrator programs, because other parts of the West Midlands are getting the money and Birmingham isn't getting the money. So that's an issue for us with the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office and ultimately with the Home Office. And we will therefore want to use what Ofsted is saying as part of the leverage through the Children's Partnership and the Community Safety Partnership. Say, come on, we need to do better than this. Often, and this may link it in part to some of Sabeer's challenge, often the issue isn't the lack of money, it's the way money is being used. It's how we deploy resource differently. And my example for that is the services we've built over 5 years that support children to stay in their families, because that's better for children and it's better for the public purse. And that's what we will continue to do. So the real answer is we need to lobby hard to make sure that external funding recognises the challenges of Birmingham. And we need to make sure that across all of our services, we're getting the maximum bang we can for our buck. But it's going to go on being a challenge.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Andy. Just on the domestic abuse issue, were the trust involved in the recent refresh of the domestic abuse strategy that the council have been doing?
Yes, we were. And we led some of the bidding for some of the perpetrator programme money. What got away from us was the decision making that started in the office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, who were then recommending how money should be spent. We think some of that money should have come our way. We're making a fuss about it with partners. And already, Sue, I are looking to pull together a group that involves the Director of Adult Services, who commissions some of the domestic abuse stuff, the Director of Public Health, and others to say, this is what Ofsted are saying, this is what we need to challenge ourselves around. What can we do that's better? Because part of Ofsted's concern was that we were putting unfair pressure on social workers, who were the only kind of public service present in a family, trying to support a mum, safeguard the children, and manage a perpetrator who nobody else was managing. That's what we need to take care of.
Thanks, Andy. Debbie?
I'll be brief because most of it's been covered now. I did have other questions, but obviously Andy's covered that a lot. I just want to whiz back to Councillor Hughes, because he sort of said you're having to cope as a trust with everything that's thrown at you. And my question, I suppose, extending from that is, why possibly is there areas that you probably shouldn't be dealing with, that you have to deal with? I know that's the job, that's the remit, but for me, it's why would unnecessary work come your way? And I'll just home in on that very briefly. When you look at, and Andrew mentioned this earlier when he said the partnership working shouldn't be underestimated, but my question, going back to the sticks being thrown your way, really is, when you look at the contract now and everything that's involved and everything you've got to do, how do we know as a scrutiny committee, without digging too deep, that partnership working is well as you, the wholly owned company, and the contract you now have, and the partnership with the council, because I'm sure there's bits that we won't always see as a scrutiny, and that might be a painful answer to answer. Maybe it's for another time, because the transparency you've talked of, but we've got to look at a scrutiny committee as looking at, well, okay, we've got you are picking up an awful lot, and you've explained today very well what you're having to cope with in all areas. But I'm just digging deeper, I suppose. Where do we see that transparency as you, the wholly owned company, and where it's failing on the council's part? Because no doubt you are picking up an awful lot. And I'll give you a brief, you mentioned COBS earlier, and I was glad you mentioned that, because you talked about the early intervention work. And Sarah will know, when I was back on this committee with Sarah in 2015, COBS was raised time and time again on the education part, because what are we doing with all these kids just floating around? They've been thrown, they're nowhere to go. And we know the EHCPs, and we know, because it's somewhere later in the next report, about children aged 5 to 16 and the placements of the EHCPs of more than 12 weeks. You're picking up an awful lot. And what is the council doing that they should be doing? You don't have to have that budget pressure, and you don't have to have that extra pressure. Where as a committee should we be focusing on knowing that link? I'm sorry for the big ramble. I'm supporting you. I'm challenging the council.
It's a great question, Councillor Clancy. And when Councillor Clancy says she's going to be brief,
Councillor McCarthy, if I start. So the first thing I'd say about the contract, if I'm really honest, is that the first time in 5 years I looked at the contract again was when we began the process of reviewing the contract. So the contract, a good contract sits on a shelf gathering dust, because we know what it requires of us, and we know who we need to work with in order to deliver what's in the contract. I think that I've had 5 years at this, that's why I look so old now. Seems at the beginning of the journey of driving improvement, and as that gathers momentum, that's part of what will make a difference for us. So, if you're a parent, a struggling parent with a child with additional needs and behavioural issues on a part-time timetable, then the pressure on you as a parent is much greater. It was already great, it's much greater. The risk of family breakdown, and therefore the involvement of the trust, increases. So the work that Sue's leading, that you're going to come on and talk to, as that gathers momentum, and we're one of the partners that will, be supporting that and looking to help. So as universal services strengthen, and the prevention early intervention work that Graham's leading, which is all age, strengthens, then essentially we should start seeing less demand for our early help service. So our early help service does more targeted work with children with real complex needs at an early point. And those three layers working well should mean that demand for social care through the child assessment and support service and the multi-agency safeguarding hub reduces. Now, all of that set against the kind of countervailing wind, which is increasing poverty, the cost of living, the greater adversity in which some families are having to bring up their children. So there isn't a neat answer to what can be done here to fix this. The real question is what can we do collectively to understand where demand is coming from, where in terms of type and where in terms of place, and how can we develop services that respond earlier? Because we don't want more and more families involved with the trust. And frankly, it should only be a really small number of children and families in the city or in any place that require a social worker. It should be the very top end in terms of the most acute need, whether in terms of a safeguarding need or any other need. And as I said earlier, we only have one legislative framework in which to do that work. So I don't know whether that blusters or answers your question.
Councillor McCarthy and then Andrew.
I've stayed quiet so far, not because I disagree with anything that's been said, but I'm absolutely terrified I'm going to go too far and breach the embargo. I don't think I'll do that if I say that the partnership relationship between ourselves and the trust, and also wider partners in the city, was very well received by Ofsted. We talk about ourselves as a family, and I've sometimes extended that to the trust being not just cousins, but the best sort of cousins, not the ones that you're in their pockets every day, but the ones that you can pick up with at any time. And know they're there for you or they're there. And over the last year, that's very much been my experience. When we've wanted to talk about wider issues, the trust have been there with our other partners. When we've had specifics to talk about, we've had those frank discussions. And from where I sit, the new contract develops that partnership even more, and is a really good foundation to go forward for the next few years.
Thank you.
Andrew, and then Sue wants to come in as well.
I was going to say something similar to Councillor McCarthy. So I think I've understood some of the kind of questions they're answering. Part of it is where should scrutiny be looking to see, as it were, what the council's responsibilities are towards the trust as well as what the trust's responsibilities are towards the council. And as Councillor McCarthy said, actually some of it laid out in will be laid out in the Ofsted. Good example of what we call dependencies. So if we are going to succeed, we are dependent upon the council delivering certain things. Likewise, if the council is going to succeed, it's dependent upon us doing certain things. So a very good example of services for support for children who are out of school. And that was something that Ofsted dug into in great detail, both in the law and I'm sure, I know that colleagues have got their sights on that. Another good example would be some of the kind of technical support, which you said, for example, accommodation and so on. So, and some of that is actually set out in the contract as well, so you can actually see it and describe it. Some of it is actually more than a spirit of the
Thank you. Sue?
Thanks, Chair. And I will be brief, I know we're short of time, but it would be remiss of me, wouldn't it, as the Director of Children and Families, not to formally thank and really say how much I appreciate the partnership working with colleagues from the Trust and what they're doing for our most vulnerable children in terms of outcomes is amazing. The progress in the improvement journey is also amazing, and it's watched nationally and it's actually watched internationally in terms of how our services managed to turn around to such an extent, and not in a smoke and mirrors way, but in a genuine on the ground hard work that's benefited children and benefiting staff. We're at the beginning of our improvement journey, as you know, and I'm really hopeful hearing Andy's comments about the positive relationship with scrutiny. And this positive relationship is what I want to develop as the director as we take you through our improvement journey. I think we're being very open and honest about the codependencies. We've had that honest conversation with the Trust in the contract discussions, but we're also, I think, for the first time, being really difficult and courageous conversations at the Safeguarding Board, for example, and at the partnership about why our children are on part-time timetables. Because in the past, people denied that has been the case. And actually, and working with our education partners in a system, it's simple. We're committed to doing, and hopefully you'll see this improvement develop in our plan, which we're going to go on to next. But I'm pretty sure we're really proud of the hard work improvements that the politicians here and officers in the Trust and the Council managed to achieve. It's a real piece of work, and it's benefiting children. That's what we all want, isn't it? So that's just what I wanted to say. Thank you for letting me say.
Thanks, Sue. I'm going to let you have the last word in a minute, Andy, but Councillor Maldina has been very patient.
Thank you. I think my questions are a little bit slightly delayed now because you've answered so many good responses. So thank you for, first of all, being so open, and appreciate that transparency the ability to understand what you've gone through as well. I appreciate that. So there is a long journey there. Just quickly, you've touched on a parental mental health support and perpetrator program earlier. You have on and off touched on it. So probably I've got some of the idea. But if you could also touch on some of the strategies that you are planning, because I understand from my background as well, from domestic violence, there is seriously a lack of intervention when it comes to perpetrator program, because I struggle with that myself, trying to get that help. And is a lot of cost involved when people want to get that? There's a lot of charge. So will this be a free service? Whatever you're looking at, I'm interested to find out more on behalf of those perpetrators out there who are struggling to improve their lives and want to improve their family situation on that. So if you could shed some light on that, and also parental mental health, what kind of support and how easy it is to access that? Because again, we've raised a very good pertinent concern, and we all feel this way, that there's a lot of parents out there who struggle with their children with disability and all kinds of different difficulties, who also on added have difficulty communicating with the pressures with mental health, with the well-being side down. It's a great struggle for them to communicate. So just a little bit of honor and a softer touch of that. If you could just give us, enlighten us on that, the future of this, please. Thank you.
Perpetrator programs is to find investment to run programs that are then free to access, because making them access on a pay basis would be different failure. So we want to, in the first instance, try and prevail on the powers that be to make some different decisions about the most recent wave of investment. And then when there's another wave, because of course what we all observe is that money comes badged for very specific things these days, rather than coming into a local authority to deliver services. So the next bit of money that comes in, we will pitch really hard using Ofsted as part of our armoury. So this has to be the priority, so that we can begin to develop perpetrator programs that meet the demand in the city. So that's the plan. Or release funds by all of us spending money in a slightly different way in order to do it ourselves. But it would absolutely be free at the point of use. On parental distress and ill health, I think there's a significant challenge, because for all kinds of reasons, the threshold for a formal adult mental health intervention with somebody is quite high. And therefore, what we've got to look at is the gap that then creates, because I think we understand, and that's why I am personally and professionally sensitive to severe critique of us. We do understand that the best way to safeguard and support the vast majority of children in the city is by supporting their parents, to look after them, care for their children well. So again, Sue and I in the Children's Partnership need to work with our partners in the NHS and the police to shape and deliver services in a different way. And it takes time. There's no quick fixes to any of this. In a sense, that's why Ofsted only inspects us every 5 years, unless we're inadequate, in which case it happens a bit more rapidly, a bit more frequently rather, because they know that these are large flotillas that we're trying to point in a different direction. So, through our early help services, we want to connect with a whole variety of community resources that exist out there, so that we can find support locally for parents who need that support, and for parents, if you like, further up in terms of need. So parents who've got children in the child protection system, one of the things we do is partner with an organisation called Safer Families, who provide volunteers to support and mentor families and to help them access some of the kind of physical resources that they may not be able to. So in a sense, we've got to be able to do 100 things 1% better. There's no single magic bullet to any of this.
Chair, could I, there was
Really
a point.
quickly.
No, there was a
quickly,
point
Councillor
with
Martina.
this, I'm sorry, I just made a point. In terms of the youth offending, team, program as well, this, I believe there's a link there as well. We just to quickly touch on that as well, in the same way that you.
Yeah, so, the Youth Offending Service for Birmingham is part of the Children's Trust. Obviously, like all our other services, so it's kind of built on partnership with the police, with education services, with the NHS. It was inspected, I think, 3 years ago and was judged to be quite weak in lots of areas. It's been re-inspected and that report's coming through the political system to Cabinet, I think, and it may be something that in due course we want to look at here as well. And what that indicates is that it still requires improvement, but that there have been significant improvements made since the last inspection, but there's still a lot that we need to do. Primarily, that's overseen by a local youth justice board that's independently chaired by all of the right partners around the table to drive the improvement that we need to see. It's the biggest youth justice service in the country, and it's serving a community that is has a number of youth justice challenges.
Thank you for that.
Thanks, Andy. And just on the youth offending service, they came to scrutiny and brought their draft plan, and we were really impressed with that plan and the amount of energy and passion and the understanding that those, some of those challenges aren't going to be fixed overnight, but that the team that they've got working there are really fixed on making those improvements. So yeah, we were very impressed. And then, so just finally, I think it's about, we can't forget that link, can we, between the work of the Trust and the wider work to improve services, across the board. And there's always going to be that link in, because where families are able to access services that are meeting their needs in a easier, more accessible way, that's going to take some pressure off the rising demand that you're feeling. So that partnership working is really important. We know that, and we shouldn't ever forget that, really, in terms of the wide range of work that the Trust is doing. So yeah, just thank you very much. We have overrun a little bit, and I'm sorry that we've kept part two of the meeting waiting, but thank you for coming, and we look forward to having you back maybe a bit sooner, because we're really keen to see the Ofsted report, and would like to have a look at the review as well as the short breaks process. Andy?
I don't know how you manage your agenda, but picking up on Sarah's point, if you wanted it as an item of any other business on your 17th of May agenda, I'm very happy to organise to come to answer questions about the Ofsted report, which will have been published a month by then, and if helpful, update on the short breaks issue. That'd be
really useful. We will. I'll make a note of that, and we can talk about that on the agenda. But thank you very much for that offer, which we will likely take you up on. Thank you very much. Thanks, Andrew, as well. We're going to move on, and apologies that we've probably only got about 40 minutes now, Sue. So we're going to move on to the Improving Services for Children and Families and the Improvement Programme Progress Update. That's a mouthful, isn't it? We've had an awful lot of information sent through, so thank you for that. And I'm not expecting committee members to have remembered everything that they've received, because there was an awful lot. But so we've got Sue Harrison, Strategic Director, but she's also accompanied by Kerry Madden, who's a Strategic Improvement Programme Director as well. So she's going to help Sue present this. So I'm going to hand it straight over, Sue.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, obviously there is a lot in the report, because there's a lot of work going on that's currently pending actually across the plan. Of course, we're not where we want to be, we're not anywhere near where we want to be, but we have made some progress. We wanted to share that with you. So I'll ask Kerry to pull together a very brief summary of the key areas of the plan. Because time is short, it will come through that, just to give the highlights and then make sure that we use some time for questions and discussion. So it's okay, I'll hand straight over to Kerry to take us through where we are with the journey. Thanks very much, Steve, and good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you this morning. So, committee will remember we came in January to share some initial information with regards to the improvement programme, and it was agreed then that we would provide a quarterly update with regards to the progress we've made. So today is that progress update on some of the headlines of key pieces of work that have taken place since the last came to talk to you. So I won't go through the details as that, but I'll as I said, how to do the headlines. So we're going to go through. We'd really welcome your thoughts as well, sort of at the end today, in terms of if there are any areas of the programme in particular you would like to have a look at in more detail. I'm really happy to come back and provide more information on particular spotlights as you see fit. So just to we always do this and set the context, but really the whole programme and all of the work that we're doing within the improvement programme is about supporting the directorate and the council with the implementation of the vision around our children and young people, which is that in Birmingham children thrive and young people are safe, healthy, included, confident and achieving. And I know the committee will have seen this slide on previous occasions, but this is basically the work, the practical things that we're doing to enable us to achieve that vision are set out in the improvement programme. So that's just to kind of set that context there, and ultimately putting children at the heart of Birmingham. And as Andy and colleagues have said this morning, it's absolutely, but this is about a whole system. It's about a whole partnership of people coming together in lots of different ways to make sure that children are absolutely at the heart of Birmingham. And the things within this programme sit alongside a wider range of work that the whole partnership is working towards with regards to getting us to this place. So again, just a little bit on context, and we are reminded of the context all the time, because this is the space that our colleagues within the Children and Families Directorate and of course our wider partners that are working with. So I think it's just the scale. I think it's quite helpful to just see that in terms of the amount of years providers that we have in the city, our schools, of course. The committee will be really pleased with us and our post-16. And of course the work of the Children and Families Directorate is working with all of these settings in the different ways and the different areas of work that the team supports. And then in terms of people, there are, so you can see there are just under 1,500 employees within the Children and Families Directorate, all working closely alongside colleagues with partnership, especially within the Children's Trust, which service, and of course there's a large number of colleagues there supporting many children in families. So just in terms of the headlines today, so what we've in the context of the last 3 months, of course, as we talked about, there have been 3 months inspection, but it's been promoted and certified by the chair of the improvement board that the place is relentless pace in terms of continuing the programme, and that's continued. And I know that colleagues have been really pleased that that's maintained. So to ensure the committee that whilst the inspection, of course, comes from the children work to improve administrative services is an absolute priority. Just in terms of the update today, we've focused around the 3 work streams. So work stream A, which is around implementing strong and effective Children and Families Directorate, and that's kind of getting the directorate to where it needs to be with all of the things that underpin there, and vulnerable children, and also some of the work around the services in work stream E. With regards to progress updates around the SEND programme and around the Children and People's Travel Service, that we'll provide those in future updates, and I know that the committee will continue to be briefed on receiving information as requested with regards to those. So just some headlines to pull out of the report in detail. Significant since the last time we spoke, of course, is that the budget has been approved at full council on the 28th of February, and that was a really significant milestone with the camp. Full council supporting children and services and ensuring that there was the right amount of resource to support the directorate to do the work that it needs to do. So that was a fantastic and brilliant news for children in the So that, of course, enables us now to with quite a lot of other work that we've been that we wanted to do. So one of the key things to kind of just highlight is our recruitment key permanent staff within the directorate. Now, of course, that takes the recruitment pipelines take time. So from when you have budget to when you can create posts or recruitment for them towards posts. But there is steady progress being made, and really significant progress around that is with regards to the senior leadership team now. So there's lots of progress being made. There's just one post now to progress, but the other posts are in place. Did you want to add anything to that, Sue? Yes, and we obviously want to build relationships and have that continuity. So the permanent team is absolutely vital. So I'm really pleased that we've made some very strong appointments, and we've now got permanent deputy for me and head of strategy commission in Parliament. We've got a permanent director of Thriving Families, and that's relevant to work stream B, because as you know, we want to work better with the trust on those vulnerable children that are hidden and have been dropping out of the system. We didn't have that post, so that's really key, because Bradley Buck, who's our permanent appointment, has actually taken up post today, hasn't she? And we can really crack on now with creating those teams that we need to create to help have oversight of those children and young people. We've also got our director of children's travel, who's made a really good start actually at widening the view of children's travel to beginning of their learning journey, not just a transport service, but an actual service supporting the wellbeing of children and young people. We still need to go out to recruitment for our director of lifelong learning, but all the time, every kind of recruitment drive we've had more interest in Birmingham, and obviously the more positive there are around things like inspection reports, that does help us with our recruitment. So I'm really pleased that we're building a very strong and very experienced team, and I've been very clear about that, kind of unashamedly elitist, wanted to bring the best people in who will be present in Birmingham and who will be able to build those relationships. So we started off from the top. Obviously now there are some teams that, as you know, were completely agency because we didn't have the budget, such as the SENAR team. We've now got our director of SEND and Inclusion, Helen Ellis, in post as well, and she's cracking on with recruiting. Some of our agency have actually been with us for a couple of years, and they're very good, and we want to make them permanent, and the other posts we're going to be advertising for. So it is critical, because obviously nobody wants to run teams on permanent agency staff. That's not good value for money, but it's not good for children because there's a lack of consistency. And as we're going to go on to talk about our restorative practice programme, the culture that we're creating and the relationship-based practice that we're insisting on, you can't have that with successions of different staff, no matter how good they are. To build relationships, we know takes time. And so from the beginning, we've been very clear about our relationship-based practice. How important it is that staff and service users feel safe in the decision-making and feel supported. So these things all link together. One team that we didn't have was a performance team in children's services. So obviously, to put the performance in one place and have one performance team is going to enable us to be much more agile with the way that we know how we're doing. Cleansing the data, making sure we're really happy. Quality of that data is important. And engaging with staff and making sure staff feel heard and listened to. We've got some brilliant, strong staff. People have felt quite disempowered over the last, say, couple of years because they've been doing their stuff on the ground and doing it really well, but they've not felt part of a bigger team and a bigger picture. So all those things really connect to having permanent staff, and we are so appreciative of that full budget decision, because to have the resource to appoint the right staff is good. That's critical, and we're cracking on now. We'll give a bit more detail about the phased recruitment, because obviously we've only got so much capacity within the council to actually physically recruit all the posts that we need to recruit. But it's brilliant news for us, and and that links everything together really. So thanks, Kerry, for coming in that bit.
Thanks, and since so also since January, there's been lots of work around getting our strategy, some key pieces of work ready for launch and ready out there. So I know that Councillor McCarthy was able to present a suite of key documents to Cabinet very recently, and those are really significant markers because they are now the detailed action plan that sits beneath those will be really moving forward and enable us in that strategic sense as well. So some really good stuff that's been happening since January. And then just to add to the performance work that Sue was talking about, we've further embedded, so using developing that performance culture and performance information and data as a tool for continuous improvement is absolutely a key thing as part of the improvement journey. And we've really worked hard, colleagues across the whole directorate, to embed. So we now have performance reports, performance clinics, performance board, making sure that there is really consistent information and data that everybody is really cited on and understanding performance at every level within the directorate. And that's been really positive to work with the team in that regard, and really that will just continue to grow and develop even further. So and then just the last one, the children with who plan, which is key pieces of work, and April's a really significant date for the directorate and partners as a whole as we work to launch the Children and Youth Plan and the UNICEF, and there's been lots of work in respect to that with regards to the focus on youth. So it's a really exciting thing to for children.
But it's only, that would only work when we've got the substantive stuff right. So we're trying to get the balance of making sure we have got those initiatives for our children, deserve them, while we're getting more and more rights respecting schools, which is always helpful for children's learning, children knowing about. It's not having that and not knowing how we're doing the performance. So in terms of the last point of make on performances, we're not where we want to be. The information we're giving you today is reliable, it's cleansed, it's policy assured, but we're moving towards a dashboard. The next quarterly report will have a dashboard because we're moving towards a Power BI approach. So that will enable us to do much better, like dicing the data. I know there's been a long-standing frustration with the time it takes to get data to everybody that asks us, but we're just round the corner now from having cultural background as well, and most importantly having reliable data which is triangulated from different sources. So I'm pleased we brought something because we've not been able to bring much to you to date, but it'll get better and improve the more that we progress through this journey. So we'll track on, talked a lot really about work stream things and vulnerable children. Obviously part of that is virtual school as well. Virtual school features heavily in the ILAC inspection. And again, making a big difference to really vulnerable children who are receiving statutory services. And there are national plans to increase the role of the virtual schools. They're working with more and more children. So we're already kind of thinking about that. Do you want something?
Thank you. So just with regards to
Chair.
Yes,
I'm dreadfully sorry to interrupt, Chair. We've overrun on the first item. I would like to think there are a significant number of questions on this. We're on work stream B at the moment. I am concerned that we're going to go on for another 20 minutes. And
yeah, we've only got 3 slides left, I think. So
3 slides.
If we can fly through them, because clearly there will be questions, but appreciate you carrying on, but just to speed it up a little bit.
Of course. Thank you. So just with regards to the work that's been taking place here since January, there's been significant work to strengthen the joint between teams supporting children in multiple family education. So that's around our children with excluded, it's around our school attendance, around children who are missing. So lots of work has been taken there, but again, more to do, and that will absolutely put us on, but there's been some more progress work. Similarly with elective home education, around ensuring that there is good information available and there's a really sort of robust response around supporting our children and families around the home education. So again, it's in progress. The work is continuing, and but you know, that's been absolutely a focused piece of work. With regards to corporate safeguarding, there's been a significant piece of work where all the directorates across the council now and their nominated representatives are all coming together on a monthly basis, focusing around corporate safeguarding, around vulnerable children, and also around adults as well. And that group have been coming together and sharing learning and supporting, and that work is currently they're undertaking a piece of self-assessment work as part of a regional piece of work. And there's been lots and lots of support with that, and that's great news for them, because that's about how our colleagues right away across the council are really supporting and absolutely looking to support with our children and people across the city. So that's a really positive step, and I know as soon as we've spoken with regards to the really positive work that the virtual school is doing with our children, and we're looking to working to expand that work further as they with their direct work with schools on a corporate care, supporting more children and the needs of more children. So just on to work stream E. So this is about the headlines, I guess, to share around the work around developing family hubs in Birmingham has continued over the last quarter, and partners will come together with regards to that, and to give assurance to the committee that aligns with strategic planning and the children's people's plan, and so that work is moving forward, and also the work around supporting our young people who are beyond 16 around their approach to sort of around how we work together and how we work together with partners to support them in line with the recommendations and breaking down barriers and some further recommendations. So again, that work is moving forward, and that's now been aligned with the children and people's plan as well. So there is lots of activity, both supported by the directorate, but also in the context of that wider partnership too. So again, those are key pieces of work. Nice. So just very really quickly, overview and progress, and I'll continue to provide this for every meeting, but there's just you can see there's just a bar chart that shows overall project progress. We are where we would expect to be, lots of activity in progress, and that's absolutely where we would expect to be at this stage with regards to projects. And with actions, we're seeing steady move towards actions that are now coming online and are in progress, and we're starting to see some of those actions moving towards green, and some are even moving towards blue, and I would expect to see even more progress by the next meeting. Please accept my apologies. You'll see on the far right of each bar chart it says Jan 22, but as you can see, each bar chart is titled January 23, so actually that's the most recent progress in the far right hand number. So we'll continue to make sure the committees agree with that. Risks and challenges. So again, just to share, we were aware because of the fantastic news of having significant funding, which now is go ahead and recruit to the people that are required within the directorate. Of course, that's going to be quite a scale and pace of recruitment. And of course, we want to move as quickly as possible. The systems and the online allow us to enable us to. So we're mindful of, we've got a plan in place to support recruitment, which includes timescales and targeted recruitment campaigns. And actually this afternoon we have a reference group who are coming together, who are going to be doing a piece of work with us with regards to looking at how they're taking their advice on, how they can support recruitment campaigns and encouraging people to come and work in Birmingham. So that's a really positive piece of work that's taking place. And also we're being supported, we have additional capacity in partnership with the council's HR team everybody working together to support the directorates to get to where it needs to be with that. And then the last one there, which we've already talked to, so we referred to, which was around access to data information. We know that there is lots of work we want to do to develop how we are using systems. So to input information into, and so that work is business work that will carry on and will focus, and gradually more and more data and reporting will become automated, and we'll have more information available to capability. So that, I think, is the last slide. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kerry, for flying through that. I do apologise that we did overrun the first item and that wasn't your responsibility, that was mine. So I only felt it fair to allow you to carry on. Councillor Clancy, you're indicated first.
Thank you for the report. It seemed very HR based, which I sort of get. But obviously we've got our report here and we've got KPIs, and obviously I'm going to focus on the KPIs because your remit of recruitment is your remit. I'll see how it affects it, but when you look at start figures that we've got on KPIs, I'm just going to focus on that. I mentioned in the previous report, I know Andy is still here, I gave an example of, it's actually on page 57 of 86, about the number of children with EHCPs. The column actually says number of children and young people aged 5 to 16 with an EHCP awaiting specialist placement for more than 12 weeks. Actually 278. And yes, in the next column, it's got an explanation as to what's going on with that. But 278 is a big figure. And I know we've talked about short breaks earlier. The impact of that must be quite substantial on those families and the children involved. And there's no colour next to that. I mean, earlier in the report, you're saying what's grey, what's amber, what's green, and it didn't give the figures for what was red. So there's no colour next to this. I don't know why. There should be a big red colour to me for 278 children. So that's my first point. It's the impact of that number affects other things. And I just want to move down to the next page. On page 58 of 86, we've got here the percentage of new educational healthcare plans issued within 20 weeks, excluding exceptions. You know, again, going back to 2015, 16, 17, 18, whenever we've looked at reports and the KPIs around the EHCPs being done within the statutory time frame has been shocking. And what's alerted me today now to this figure, there's no red rag rating next to it, and it might be a green red rating, but you've got the target here of 65%. The law, statutory law, should be telling everybody that the target is 100%. Why is it 65%? You're 35% short of what should be 100%. No target should be 65%. It should be 100%. I just cannot understand why in that KPI we've got 65%. It's almost saying, certainly to us as a scrutiny committee, well, we're comfortable with that because that's a comfortable figure for us to work by. That's the baseline, that's the bar chart, that's what we're going to raise it to because that is the comfortable zone we will work within. No matter how uncomfortable it is, the target should be 100%. And as a committee, I think we should certainly be focusing on that as a future KPI somewhere, because as councillors, it's raised a massive red flag for me. And it questions then, as a scrutiny committee, what are the percentages that are in the report that actually should not be a target of 65 or whatever. And if you look through, all targets should be 100%, not 65%. I shall leave it there, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Clancy, and I'm sure that you've stolen one of Councillor Hughes' questions. Sue, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, and it might be helpful to say, obviously we're happy to bring any of the brilliant non-KPIs that we report to the Department of Education to this committee, but you just be drowned in KPIs. The reason we brought these are the KPIs that corporately we are scrutinised on, that we take to the corporate leadership team, and particularly the STEM KPIs are in the Accelerated Progress Plan, which has been signed off by the Department of Education and which is overseen by the STEM Improvement Board, which, as you know, has our STEM Commissioner as the chair. And morally, of course, all targets should be 100% for kind of achievement and inclusion. What you'd get if we set 100% as an official target would be everything red. So to manage the progress, we did set a target, which at the time was aspirational, because we were so far below national averages. To get to national averages was a target. Are we happy that anybody's waiting longer than 20 weeks? Well, no, we're not. And I'll take that on board and we'll discuss at the STEM Improvement Board, right, well, now we're at national averages, how can we get even better? Because that's something we need to work on. In terms of the impact of children out of school, again, I'm pleased we're measuring this, and you're right, it should be red. It's a target that is in kind of progress. So next time you'll see it as that. Because it is the first time we've been able to accurately measure the number of children that have been out of school for various reasons, because they're everywhere. And again, this is why I'm having the Director of Family and Families to have that overview of those children and have an overview of the support. So the fact we've got a dedicated placement team is a strength. We do support those children through that team. Is it as good as them having a school placement? Clearly, no, it isn't. It's not where it wants to be. But I'm really happy to have more information come to this committee about the different kinds of work we're doing with, because that 278, each one of those figures is an actual child with a different context, a different family situation, a different reason why they're finding it hard to access school. Some of them it will be school anxiety, they don't want to go. With others, will be parental dissatisfaction with the move them from that school to the waiting for another school. So we can go into lived experiences and we can really have deep dives into those children. I think it's true to say that in the past, not just in Birmingham, children have been forgotten when they've dropped out of the system. We're making a big effort to focus on those children. And of course, we want to see that number come down. And there's a lot of different things that we're doing to support those children being included. The reassurance I can offer today is that those children are being overseen. We are in contact with them, we're in contact with their families, which is better than us not knowing either where they are. And that number changes continually because we get children back into school, new children move into Birmingham that have found education, or there's more. And part of that inclusion system does include COPS, as was mentioned before. It does include how we support our schools to be inclusive. So there's a lot of work, which is all partnership based, around making sure we reduce that 278. But thank you for pointing out the fact it's not been RAD rated. It's a very new thing that we're measuring, but we will RAD rate it next time, and we can bring more detail about what we're doing to support those families. So all the targets that we've set here have been approved either by the corporate leadership team or by the Department of Education, depending which plan they originally come from. So that question is also making me think that perhaps Kerry will be going back and produce a dashboard. We cross-reference where else these targets are measured and monitored, because we've presented them because we present them everywhere at different places, and we've got a common narrative around them. But that might be really helpful context, so thank you for that.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to cut short what I intended to say and get straight to a couple of comments and some questions. I do find the information in this, I find it confusing. On page 28, for instance, it says, an overview of the baselining exercise is provided in Appendix 2. And I go to Appendix 2, it says things like, management welcome the baselining. I was expecting to find an indication of where we are and what the results of the baselining was. So as an information exercise, it's meaningless to me. And some of the terminology on page 31, we're talking about children known to social workers and children ever known to social workers. And there seems to be some confusion about what we're talking about, because to me, they are two distinct classes of children. So again, I'm left confused. I'm also confused by the RAG ratings, because we've got red, amber, green, grey, blue. It just seems to be getting more complicated. If it's a RAG rating, why don't we just stick to red, amber and green? On the page 51, children waiting more than 12 weeks for the placements, I'm just wondering when the counting starts on that, because there has been a tendency in recent times to name a school in an EHCP, but to name it for a significant point in the future. So in March, you might say, well, we haven't got a school place, but we're going to name this for September. So is that included in those figures or not? Let me just have a look at this for a second. Apologies, Chair. The quarters that are indicated in the RAG rated, I'm not sure where they're from. So on the eligible children, the children eligible for under-school transport, where it says 100% of them are getting it. Well, I mean, in my ward, I know one child who hasn't had under-school transport for a number of months. He's entitled to it. He's got a school place. Unfortunately, the school place is about 10 miles from where he lives. So he needs the transport, but under-school transport won't take him to school. So I don't know what quarters the 100% is related to. And it seems to me that it'd be kind of unusual if I was the only councillor who had a child entitled to after-school transport who wasn't getting it. If we extrapolate that, I don't think it's ridiculous to do that. This situation. Something else that concerns me, obviously, it is actually going to be a very small number. Yeah, I'll leave it at that, Chair, on that one. New HCPs, as Councillor Clancy has already said, the idea, we're approaching 10 years of the Children and Families Act. The idea that not meeting what is a legal timescale, the idea that should be rated green just seems astonishing to me. I appreciate what you say about the 100% targets. And it does seem to me that the local authority is resorting to tactics to try and do that. So I am very concerned about the number of EHCPs where the school, the EHCP says this child requires a mainstream school, and they name mainstream by type. Now that seems to me to be a tactic just to finalise a plan. And people might think that if you're a child with an EHCP waiting for a mainstream place, that waiting in a mainstream school would be a good place to be. But of course, if that school isn't named in the plan, the school the child is at isn't obliged to provide what's in the EHCP. So it's very difficult to see that as anything other than a tactic to finalise plans. So I would like to know how many children we have in that category. How many children have mainstream named by type who are still waiting for the school place? I'm going to leave it at that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. So, Suze, it's time to have a look at resetting that target on, from 65% upwards.
Improvement report, I'll definitely feed the comments back to improve. It's also set and approved by the DFE in our accelerated progress plan. So that's the target that's been agreed by the departments. And of course, when we get re-inspected, that is the target that we get re-inspected against. Well, that probably will be 12 months. 12 months will pass really quickly. But certainly, Councillor McCall is also on the standing improvement board. So I'm sure we'll both feed back the comments from scrutiny. But again, I can't, it's not been in my remit to adjust that target when it's been set by the improvement board and approved by the DFE. With the AGP. I think it would be interesting to ask Pat Tate, our DFE advisor, what's the DFE approach to raising targets to above national for local authorities that are in the intervention. We want to be ambitious and aspirational targets, and we absolutely do. Is she picking up similar comments from scrutiny committees in other areas where she works who are in intervention? I'd be really interested to know those views. Certainly what we can do, no matter whether we change the target or whether we don't, we can continue to show progress against this target because we all want young people to get the support package that they need. And the start of getting that support package is having a timely education, health and care plan. But I would also say that I've also really had a focus with Helen Ellis on making sure we're working on the quality of the plans as well, because some places they've drastically improved the timescales. And we know that quality is still an issue in terms of consistency because of the large numbers of agencies we've got. So for me, there's two bits. Of course, I want timing plans, but those timing plans have got to be good quality plans as well. So again, if we're thinking about deep dive areas for this committee, we're really good for Helen Ellis to come to explain the quite technical questions that Councillor Hughes has raised today about naming mainstream and children in that category. She lives this every day, so she would be able to report on that. But also, I think we need to report on timeliness and on quality. Now, we've not yet introduced our KPI for quality, but we will be doing the role with parents. We need a system of quality assurance across the directorate. That's in our improvement plan. It's not something that we should have done yet because you have to do things in sequence. But 100% timely plans and quality plans. I have to say there's only one place in the country that's achieved 100%, and that is Rutland, and they have something like 60 plans in the whole lot, obviously they're very tiny. But corporate gives us a lot of challenge on why isn't it 100%, because that's what we aim at. I think we can have an aspirational aim if we don't even change the physical target and have to keep.
Sorry, Sue, I did hijack Councillor Hughes's questions there a bit. So he asked around the baselining, asked around the RAG ratings, and specifically about where what period of time those quarterly figures were relating to.
Yeah, I mean, apologies if the RAG rating is confusing, because we do have the red and the green, but we wanted another category for actions which we've actually completed. Many of these actions were never completed. We'll always working on quality of plans, for example. But some things, do you want to just say an example of things that we've made do and we've finished them?
Absolutely. So green is when something's completed, and then you want to be absolutely sure it's embedded and then it goes to blue. And one of the reasons why we've used that by rating is because that's the other programmes across the council are also using that. So we're in line and consistent with others. So we've used that there. But for example, when we completed pieces of work, for example, around the vision of the director, we wanted to be sure that that's embedded. So we can absolutely look at how we can make that more visually easily presented, if that helps. So I'll think about that for the next time.
The children not known and unknown, that's a DFE definition that we've used. Again, we could make that clearer in the reports, because some things we have to give.
Which one's the definition then?
The children known now, but there's children that have ever been known. So when we're calculating, for example, some categories around deprivation, one of the factors is children that are known to social care now, or children that have had a social worker in the past, and those are two different things. And it's all encompassing, isn't it? If you just did the children with social worker now, there is some children out of that.
Sorry, Sue. So it's really children that have previously been known to social services.
They're mixing them up on the same line, is not.
So that's appreciate that. Thank you.
Can I just ever so quickly come back, Chair, on the quality of plans? I'm raising this because someone actually showed me one. Another councillor showed me a plan and said, what do you think of that? And my honest answer was, the quality of the plan isn't very good. It doesn't identify the needs particularly well. And there's not much guidance there on the support that's needed. But I said, the child is in a good school. So you don't need to worry too much about it. If you want to jump up and down about the quality of the plan, I said, just let it run for a bit, see how it goes. When it comes to an annual review, you can pick things up on the basis of experience, how the kids got on at school and that. So I'm not saying quality doesn't matter. What I am saying is that placement matters so much more than anything else. That's what we've got to get sorted out. If we can get the placement sorted out, then the kids will be getting the support they need. And I think the last meeting was it 400 children not in school. That's a phenomenal amount of children. And sorry, Chair, to go on about this. The child I referred to who's not getting down to school transport right now, even though he's entitled to it, it has been for some months. That parent has to stop at home every day, all day, looking after her child. And in what is a very tough economic climate, cannot go to work. Now, I think putting parents through that for months at a time is totally unacceptable. And one of the reasons it worries me is that cases like that have the potential to wind up in Andy's portfolio as something he has to deal with.
None of us want to put additional pressure on his families, and again, if the family wants to share the details with me, I'll look into that. Hayes Council use, because my understanding is that young people that are entitled to the transport are getting that transport. So I'm happy to look into that outside this meeting. I think we've been very open that we know that placements is an issue, and we'll continue to bring those numbers. We've got a variety of strategies around it that we're pulling together through our sufficiency plan to make sure that we're planning ahead, to make sure that not only do we reduce these numbers, but we're not in this position again, because we've always got to be looking ahead to those number of placements. And we're working closely with colleagues in the trust around those children we're concerned about. We have now reduced, there's no children looked after that haven't got a school place. We're really prioritising children that are being worked with in the trust in ways that didn't happen before, to make sure that we absolutely ensure that we keep those children in school with background support. So education services are working closely with social care colleagues. Again, we're not where we want to be, but we're moving forward. And I think we're being very open about the fact that we are certainly not saying this is where we want to be. We're just saying we're moving in the right direction, and the quarterly report should show that kind of relentless moving forward. So, you know, we welcome the questions, and they are difficult questions, because we've got some children not in school who should be in school. We've got some head teachers struggling to support children because they say they're not getting the right resources. We're having all those discussions, and we're making strategic plans to help improve, but I accept that doesn't help those children that are at home today. All we can do is move as quickly as we can, supporting those individual children to make sure that they don't drop out of the system completely, and that we're working with the trust to support those families who are under incredible pressure. So I welcome the questions, and we'll keep having these discussions every quarter, as well as from the improvement plan. Happy to bring Helen Ellis to talk more about Sendor. Happy to bring Ramsey to talk more about what are we doing for children excluded from school. In terms of COBS, we're working with Mr. Howell, you know, the head teacher from COBS, around the vision for what he wants the provision to look like. I'm really proud that we've commissioned the biggest group, you know, in the country, and I want to make sure we've got the right provision across the city for him and for his teachers. So he's welcoming working with us, as well as with our education officers. Again, to think about, well, where do we want to be? Where we want to be is not here. So where do we want to be? It's no good having COBS that's full technically, but children not attending COBS. And the head teacher's got some ideas of how we can help those youngsters attend his provision. That's not been in place until now. So again, that's another area where you might want us to come to talk about what we're doing with alternative pathways. Because some young people do struggle, don't they, to access the traditional curriculum, and alternative pathways and alternative provision sometimes can really keep children and young people interested and help them achieve the, you know, really great things, whereas they just drop out of school and they're lost to us. So I suppose we ask all the choices to what do you want us to bring, and that's why the report's so detailed, with references to all the actions in the plan. But these are conversations that we need to continue having out there, and we're happy to bring anything back.
Thanks, Sue. I know Councillor McCarthy's waiting to come in. Just very quickly, Councillor
Very
Hughes.
quickly, Chair, you've just used a phrase there that I have to be honest, sent a shiver down my spine when you describe COPS as technically full. I would like some explanation about that, because my understanding is we've probably got, I don't know, 100 secondary school children, excluded children who don't have a school place. Now, apart from the fact that they're excluded because there is some kind of issue or problem, the idea that those children are not anywhere, I think is a really big area for concern. And yet we've got primary school children being excluded because they have special needs and being at COBS. I genuinely don't understand how we've got this disparity. And that phrase, technically full, it's just scary. And that's me.
By that, I mean, some children do have a place at COBS, but they don't attend that place because they don't want to go to COBS. So working with those families is about how we encourage those young people to engage in education. And I'm happy to bring in probably a teacher will come with me to share all the ways that we're trying to engage those young people. But we're getting beyond, have we got a child in a school place tick box? That is not our approach. we might have a child in a school place, but the question that's important is, are they attending in that school? And are they doing well? And it could be a provisional setting, it might not be a school. But if we've got them a place and they're not attending, we need to continue to work with those children to engage them. That's what I meant by attending.
Just, I'm sorry to delay this, but I'm worried about this. Are you saying that if 10 kids don't turn up for school at COBS, you're going to put another 10 kids in there?
No, absolutely not. We're going to work with them to encourage them and enable them to attend that provision and understand why aren't they attending that provision. There's no way that it will be illegal to give that place to another child when a young person has the right to that place. My point is, we need to make sure that those children are attending that provision, not just be satisfied that they've got a place in it. And it's the same with post-16 as well. You know, we've followed up a lot of young people with post-16 education and care plans. Those placements haven't been meeting their needs. And we've worked really hard over the last 6 months to make sure that, you know, we have made things better for some of those young people, again, not enough of them, making sure that they're having an appropriate course at an appropriate level, not just that we've got them over the door of a setting. That's what I'm really focusing on, the quality of educational experience. And it's not good enough to say, well, we've got them a place, not our problem if they're not attending. Legally, it's not, but of course, morally, it is. And absolutely, we are owning that responsibility, not just to get them a place. We've not even done that for some of our children, I accept that, but we're working on it. But then when they've got that place, to make sure that we enable them to attend it and provide it.
Thanks, Sue. Councillor McCarthy.
Just very quickly, just to pick up on Councillor Hughes' point, I know he was using the individual case as a wider illustration, but either Sue or myself or both of us would be quite happy to look into that. And when we get cases raised with us, not only do we try to resolve them, but we do try to pull out any wider issues that need to be picked up. On the RAG ratings, I think Kerry was right to prioritise for today the explanation of what's going on. The base collection of the data does include where we started from and why the targets are where they are, and certainly on the HCP figures, where we started from would have needed a new colour in itself. Red really wouldn't have been a reflection of how bad it was. So, you know, it's, I can't remember what SMART stands for, but I know that the R is realistic. We do need to be showing progress and reviewing these things, but where they are set by the DFE, it might be useful for Pat to come and talk to the committee, so you've got that understanding. I think you've got Helen next month on the APP, so that, if I've read the board plan correctly, so that'll be another opportunity for you to have a look, perhaps with some of that information.
Thanks, Councillor McCarthy.
And thank you to the cabinet member, the director.
From you, yes, Councillor Hughes, and of course I would thank them, but I haven't quite finished.
Sorry, sir.
That thanks for the input. I mean, there are a few bits there, Sue, that you talked about that we can definitely have a think about in terms of looking at some deep dive areas. I know that a recommendation was for us to possibly put something forward, but I think we need to have a bit more discussion as a committee about what those areas are. Councillor Bohr, on the chair of coordinating scrutiny, is putting through some really interesting suggestions and proposals around how scrutiny to help scrutiny function better and to add more, to more value. And I think some of that will really open up some opportunity to do some of that deep dive work. We've undertaken some really good task and finish pieces of work. And I think that as this scrutiny committee, we could make far more use of that approach to look at some of those key areas. So I think we will have that discussion and come back to you around some key focus areas. But clearly we're going to note the report and thank you for coming and presenting to us. Thanks. So we are running a few minutes over just for a change, so apologies for that, but we haven't got much more to do. And the Birmingham, sorry, just bear with me, just got to find my right note now. The Birmingham Safeguarding Children's Partnership were going to come and then they weren't able to come because of the timing of their annual report, which isn't going to be signed off now until May when it goes to their executive board. We've already got, sorry, we've moved on to the work programme now. We've already got 3 substantial items for the May programme, so I don't feel as though we would have time to put a 4th item on to give it justice, even if we extended that programme. So we may have to just have a think about that, and maybe invite them back to the June or have we got a meeting in June, Amanda?
Probably be informal.
Be an informal meeting. So we can have more of a discussion then about the work programme, because we've also got quite a list of items that are waiting for us to have a look at as well. So I think we need a bit more of an in-depth discussion about our work programme, taking on board what I said about doing some deep dive work as well. And we have a look at that. Councillor Hughes?
Just one brief suggestion, Chair, in a lot of what we've just heard. I think, could we get something or someone from COBS?
Definitely, yeah.
I think it'd be good to have some feedback from them about how they see the situation.
Yeah. And I know Sue suggested that Steve Howells comes along to one of the meetings with her, and yeah, we'd certainly have a look at that. Councillor McCarthy?
You want to do something workshoppy on data, not to take it offline, but just so that you can explore it in a bit more depth. If you want to have a think about it.
Yeah, I think at our informal June meeting, we can have a look at utilising some of the different approaches to pick up some of the bits of work that we wouldn't necessarily have to do in a formal meeting. And I think that would be a really good idea. As well as I'm really hoping that we do get out of this building in the next municipal year to go and look at some of the projects, look at COBS, go over to the Trust, have a look over there, because I think that would, really be good for us to do as well. So there's lots of us to look at, lots of things for us to look at, but also I'm really keen to look at different ways of doing some of it that make it much more beneficial for not just us, but also people delivering those services. So that's great. Leave that with us. Councillor Hughes and myself will have a look at it at the meeting as well, and just try and look at some of the key areas that we need to schedule in somewhere, because I think we've got 7, 8 areas that we need to get scheduled in. So thank you for that. Our next meeting is on the 17th of May, and that's the last one for the municipal year, which will be in these rooms. And like I said, we've got 3 topics on the agenda, so we may, we may overrun just a little bit, just to make sure that we get a full discussion on those items. Item 10 on the agenda is a request for call-in. I haven't been made aware of anything, so I'm assuming that there isn't anything. No, thank you very much. And any other urgent business? No, and the final one is authority to the chair and officers outside of meetings. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your patience, your contributions and your input. And see you next month.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.